In this episode, we'll be talking about stories that our guest has documented in his new book, Black on Madison Avenue. He has spent the past 40 years in advertising at some of the industry's most prestigious agencies. Welcome to the show, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Toby. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me for a soulful conversation on this episode. I'm looking so forward to, talking to you about all the stories you've experienced. Before we start recording, I was saying, yeah, I must admit I've not fully read the book. You sent me a copy. I'm so thankful for that. But the ones I've read, the chapters I've read, I'm like, oh my God, Mark has experienced a lot and he knows what he has truly written in this book. And this is going to be a blessing to everyone who picks up the book to read it. But I would just love you to speak. I would love you to speak about it yourself because you are the person who firsthand experienced all of these stories. And I would just love you to tell us about the book. Like, what motivated you to finally write the book that you are not planning to write?
Yes, this book had an interesting journey. It began as just a collection of a few stories that I had written that I was working on sort of on the side while actually writing another book entirely. And these stories didn't fit into that book. They were a different topic and different subject. But the stories really had to come out. And so I wrote them and decided to see how I could share them with others. And I had a conversation with the editor of Advertising Age, which is the main industry journal for the advertising industry. And she talked about it as though they were chapters in a book. And I said, well, there isn't a book yet. And she said, well, go write it. And that's what I had to do. And it didn't take very long to write this book. As you said, I've spent, 4 decades in the advertising agency business. And as an African American in the business, it can be a fairly lonely experience. Advertising agencies are some of the most undiverse places to work in the US.
Hmm. Yeah. And how was that like for you? I would love to just, dive down into it basically. What does it mean to be black in the advertising agency on Madison Avenue?
um, well, I'll give you a couple of statistics just as an example or to paint a picture. In New York City, which is really the heart of the advertising agency business, in New York, about 66% of the adult workforce are people of color.
Hmm.
So the majority of workers in New York are people of color. But in advertising agencies, instead of 66%, it's only 27% people of color who work at advertising agencies. So that's a gap of almost 40 points in difference from what it ought to be based on the population of New York. And uh, of the That's people of color in total. So that includes African Americans, it includes Latinos, it includes Asian Americans. If you were just looking at black people in the advertising business, it's only about 7%. It's a pretty small number.
Yeah.
And then if you look at it in terms of managerial positions, anyone of authority or power within the business, it's down to about 2%.
Wow. But why is this so actually? Why I okay, I might know the answer to this, but from your own standpoint of view, why is it so that the blacks are not given or the African Americans are not given that opportunity in the advertising business? Why is it so saturated by other ethnicity?
Advertising agencies are a lot like country clubs in the sense that in order to get into them, you have to know somebody who's already there who invites you in. You have
Mm.
to have contacts within the business who will be references for you and say, yeah, you should hire this person. And, if we don't have people already in the business, it's hard to get that point of entry. Um, you really have to knock down the door, and that takes an extraordinary effort.
Mm. Yes, I love what you just talked about right now. Knock down the door. So, Mark,
Yeah.
can you tell us how did you knock down the door? How did you step in into the room? How did you make a space for yourself? How did you get a seat at the table, or did you create a table for yourself? A lot of questions in that regards.
Well, my very first job interview right out of college to try to get my first job in advertising, I met with the director of human resources, and this woman said, "You seem like a very bright young man, so I'm going to be honest with you. We don't hire Negroes here."
Hmm,
Um, and she said, "Other companies may not tell you the truth, but they're not going to hire you either." She said, "At least I'm telling you the truth."
hmm,
And she said, I'll hire you in a different department, but not in management. That will never happen." And I said, "No, thank you." She was making me a job offer for something else, and I turned it down, which is a fairly radical thing to do as a young black man. No one in my family had ever turned down a job offer before, especially not a job offer at a prestigious company, that paid well and all of that. But it wasn't the job that I wanted. So I said, "No, thank you." I said, "I'll just keep looking until I find someplace that does say yes." And
hmm.
that's what I had to do. I kept looking, and eventually I did find a place that was smart enough to say yes and hire me.
Yes, you don't lower your standard. You
Yes.
just keep on looking and keep on searching for what befits you, what you deserve. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I really love that you talked about this right now because when I was going through your book, it stuck to me too. That's in chapter 5 because I have it marked here. Chapter 5 of the book where you talked about say no thank you or something like that. So it was the topic of the chapter. And I was like, yes, how did Mark get the courage at that point in his life to say no, thank you. I deserve better than this.
Well, I was very lucky that I went to you know schools that inspired in me a sense of there is no ceiling to your ambition. That if you believe in yourself and if you prepare yourself properly, you can do anything. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't do anything. That it's simply a matter of the right preparation and the right belief.
Hmm. You can do anything. It's about the right preparation and the right belief.
Yes.
I mean, if we're in this conversation right now, that's enough for me to take. That's enough for me to take home to become a better person. Wow. Yes. I mean, it's all about your belief, basically. Yeah. And one question that the director asked you in same chapter 5 was that, and that's one thing I would also love to know to myself because I know we didn't talk about it earlier. That's she asked you about your desire to to have a career in advertising. Like, what drew your desire to start a career or have a career in advertising? So I'd love to know that to myself. I'll just be curious.
Well, while I was a student in college, one of the alumni came back to the school to talk about his career in advertising and what he did. And he spoke to a room full of students. There were probably about 150 of us in the room at the time. And he spoke with such passion, but such joy about what he did. You could tell immediately how much joy he got from what he was doing. And I just listened to him and said, I want that feeling that he has.
Mm,
And he said that, there's nothing like advertising to inspire competition and creativity and collaboration and a sense of community, a sense of immediacy that your message is out there right there in the moment, and a sense of immortality. That if your message is powerful enough and creative enough and inspired enough, it will last forever. And I said, wow, that's exactly what I would like to do with my life. And so after his presentation, he was supposed to go and meet with all the students in the dining hall and talk further over lunch.
mm,
And instead, I grabbed him by the arm and I asked him, could I take him to lunch at a restaurant in town? So I stole him away from the luncheon he was supposed to attend, and he and I just had a one-on-one meeting over lunch at a restaurant and talked further. And I asked him 100 questions and how he got into the business and what his advice was for me. And I have been on that path ever since.
Yes, and you've been successful on that part ever since. I guess I believe that was like one of the best decisions you made in your life, right? To try that part of
Absolutely.
advertising. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what were some of the
I'm very
challenges?
fortunate.
Yeah, yes, I believe that. Even from, I mean, I will encourage everyone out there to get the book to read it. I mean, you get a lot of lessons, you learn a lot of lessons from it, like we talked about in chapter 5, about knowing what you deserve and standing up to it and say, yeah, this is my standard, and fighting for what you believe you deserve, and not, you know, letting anyone to undermine you because of your skin color, because of your ethnicity, your sexuality, your belief, whatever it might be. Yeah. And other lessons from throughout the book. I mean, a lot of stories and a lot of lessons filled in everything. So it's a fun read, basically. The link to
Yeah.
your website will be in the show notes of this episode. So I encourage everyone to get the book, read the book. By the time it's out, it's going to be out by July 1st, 2023. And hopefully, when you're listening to this episode, it's already out or it's almost out at that time. Yeah. So I just love to, learn from your expertise as, as experienced as you are for decades in advertising. Um, what steps do I have to take to successfully market and advertise a product like Adi with Oprah, for example?
The most important thing, the most important skill in advertising is actually probably psychology, is understanding the mindset of your consumer audience, understanding the things that motivate them, understanding why they do the things they do, why they make the choices that they make.
Mm,
And once you understand the behavior of your consumer, then you can be responsive to that behavior. You can say, oh, they choose these things for these reasons. I can build on that knowledge and understanding and that insight and provide a product that equally meets those needs for that consumer.
mm,
And with Addie as an example, Addie was the first Black American Girl doll, and the American Girl dolls are very, very popular, and they're also very, very expensive. But uh, I helped to introduce Addie, the first Black doll from the collection back in the 1990s, and it was meeting a need for um, uh, Black moms and Black daughters to have that experience that they saw everyone else was having that they didn't have. The sense to identify with the doll character and the stories and the history of the doll character, and to immerse yourself in that adventure of that doll character. Um, and unless you have a Black doll that has her own identity and her own history and her own story, you can't immerse yourself in that adventure.
mm,
So we created all of that and had to go to great lengths to make sure that it was authentic, that it was intelligent, that it was something that you want to embrace and identify with. And all of the details had to be just right. So a lot of scholars and experts in different areas in terms of fashion and the history and psychology and all of that went into the process
mm.
of developing that product.
Yeah. And I believe you took some risk, towards developing that product, or was it like oh, this is a gap in the market and we just have to fill it?
Um, there's never any certainty
Mm,
about there's a gap in the market. We just have to fill it. Um, there's always a risk. There's always a gamble. And so here again, preparation is important. Knowing who your audience is, and making sure that as you invest a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources and money in bringing a product from idea to reality,
mm,
you are using as much data and information as possible um, to make sure that you're not flying too far off from the science of marketing. Marketing is both science and art, and they
Yeah.
have to be blended carefully together. But you have to have that information. Information and knowledge empowers everything that you do.
Mm. Information and knowledge empowers everything that you do. Yeah. I've learned a lot already from you, Mark, from this short conversation I've had so far. But I'll still love to know the the biggest lessons that you've learned over 40 years in advertising, especially being a black person in a market or in a place where there are not a lot of black people. So, what are like some of the biggest lessons you've learned in over 4 decades in advertising?
Um, I think perhaps the biggest lesson is um, that advertising is a tremendously personal experience, a tremendously personal business. Um, you cannot, even though I said it's a science, you cannot divorce it from the human, very personal, very subjective aspect of it. Um, if I am too detached from my work, if I'm not reacting to it as 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 my consumer audience would react to it, then I'm going to make mistakes.
Mm,
And that is especially true in multicultural marketing. A lot of the big mainstream agencies think that they can do effective, successful multicultural marketing, but they can't. And the reason they can't is because their experience, their life experience, is not the same as their consumer. So they don't relate to it. They don't understand it on a very human level.
mm,
And so when I talk about, and my peers in multicultural marketing talk about our work, we say that marketing to African Americans is not just what we do, it is who we are. And that is what makes the difference.
mm. This is who we are. Yeah. That's a big lesson. I mean, you can't separate your identity from marketing, basically. And yeah, I think, or from my little understanding, you also bring in your personality, your experiences, your belief, and yeah, perspective into the product that you advertise or the advertisement strategies that you create for a product. Also, yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. You really have to internalize a lot of the insights and understanding and make it something that is very personal.
Yeah. Um, it, just for your book, I'll love to go back to your book, Black on Madison Avenue. I know it's filled with a lot of stories. It's filled with a lot of experiences. It's filled with a lot of memories that you have documented over the years, or I've had the opportunity to collect over the years. So yes, that's it. Black on Madison Avenue. Yeah. Nice cover, by the way. Um, I'll just love to know, is there like a particular memory, a particular story, a particular experience that stands out, to you today, like that you can never ever forget, that you could, always reflect back on and still remember and, appreciate or remember the lessons that you got from it, or how the moment felt like to you was so special?
Um, there are so many, and I've, for better or for worse, I've been in the business so long that I have many stories and many memories. I think the friends that I've made along the
Mm,
way, um, uh, that's an important part of my work experience. Is the people that I've gotten to know, and all of the wisdom that I've been able to learn from the people I've worked with. And when I first made the transition from mainstream marketing to multicultural marketing, and first began working at the Uniworld Group, which is
mm,
a black advertising agency. And at the time that I was there, it was the largest black agency in the U.S. Um, the thing that struck me the most about working at Uniworld was that when you work for a mainstream agency, you have to be a certain kind of personality. You have to be like your coworkers, and since they are, 95% of them are white, you have to look like them, dress like them, talk like them, socialize like them in order for them to be comfortable.
Mm,
Because there's nothing more problematic than making your coworkers feel uncomfortable. And if you're too different from them, they're going to get uncomfortable. If
mm,
you're too black for them, they're going to get uncomfortable. But at Uniworld, there's none of that. If you work for a black owned company or a Latino owned company or an Asian owned company, um, there's none of that. You have to look like me and dress like me and talk like me. You can simply be you.
mm,
And the idea of just being yourself is so liberating in the sense of all of that baggage you don't have to carry around anymore. All of that extra things that you don't have to think about anymore, and just be who you are and talk the way you talk and dress the way you want to dress and behave the way you want to behave, and just bring what's unique about yourself to the work experience. It is truly liberating. And it's a chapter in my book called Working from Home,
mm,
because it feels like I am working from home when I am with these people.
mm. Yeah. And would you say that, maybe improves your creativity in some ways because you have that freedom to express yourself and be who you truly are?
Absolutely.
Mm. Then,
Absolutely.
yeah, then you're able to, maybe bring in more color to your work and bring in more of Mark into your work, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just love to know also, like, I know in the course of the 4 decades, you've, you know, seen fame, you've worked with famous people, you've done, and you've gone to fancy places, basically. How was that like, for you? Like, I know you've talked about it a little bit, working with the white people, I said white people, working, sorry. Uh, try to like be with like them and dress like them and do that. But how was it like for you dealing with fame, working with famous people, and going to fancy places and doing fancy things?
Um, well, I've been very fortunate to know quite a lot of famous people over the course of my career, and work with a lot of famous people.
Mm,
Um, and it's very helpful to remember that every famous person that you meet was a regular person once. And when they look in the mirror, most of the time, they just see themselves as a regular person. So they want you to talk to them and interact with them like they're your friend, like they're just another regular person. Don't treat them like they're on a pedestal. Don't treat them like, oh, there's this special thing.
mm,
Um, they want to be able to relax and, have great conversation and be at ease and be themselves. There are a few celebrities who are fixated on themselves,
mm,
but most people are like, I just want to be who I am. There's a story in the book about um, when I worked on the Mike Tyson Evander Holyfield boxing match. It was the second fight that they did, um, and we needed to film a commercial to promote the boxing match. And the executives from Showtime said, "Can we use the existing footage from the last fight in the commercial rather than shoot them again?" And at the time, I was working with Spike Lee
mm,
at his agency. And Spike and I were trying to be cooperative and do whatever the client wanted. But we said, well, why can't we shoot a new commercial? Why do we have to use old footage? And the client explained that, well, when we had the first fight, we did a shoot with Evander and Mike, and everything was all set up. And at the time of the shoot, Evander walks into the studio where we were going to do the filming, and he actually showed up an hour early, came all by himself, had his gym bag that he was carrying, and in his gym bag, he had his boxing trunks that he was going to wear for the shoot, and he had a travel iron.
Mhm.
And he said, "Where can I set up my travel iron so I can iron my boxing shorts?" And everybody got a good laugh out of the whole thing and said, "Evander, you don't have to iron your own boxing shorts. We'll take care of all of that for you. Go over there, have some breakfast, relax. We'll take care of everything for you."
Mm.
And he just wanted to be a normal guy. And, that's what he felt that he was expected to do. And then we all waited a while for Mike to show up. And we ended up waiting the entire day. Mike didn't show up until 2 days later,
Oh, wow.
after the shoot was was supposed to happen. Showed
Yeah.
up 2 days later. Nobody had heard from him or knew where he was or what he was doing.
Mm.
But he showed up with 10 people with him in an entourage. And he said, "Everybody's hungry. We need to eat." And so it was like night and day between Mike and Evander in terms of the experiences there.
Mm.
And the executives from Showtime said, "So we don't want to have to go through that again."
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's why they didn't want us to have to shoot them a second time. And we actually came up with a very creative solution. And I don't want to spoil the story, but if you
Mhm.
read the book, we came up with a new and different way of handling the commercial for the rematch between Mike and Evander. Um, but Evander is more typical of most of the celebrities and famous people that I've worked with. Is they just want to be themselves.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, it's good to be yourself even when you have so much fame. It's good to be down to earth, basically. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another story for another day. Back to your book. In the last chapter, you talked about sharecropping on Madison Avenue. What does that mean? What does sharecropping mean? Can you explain that to us?
Well, sharecropping historically was a system created after the Civil War in America, after slavery, where the Southern plantation owners and Southern farmers wanted to continue to control the labor that they had under slavery and continue to control Black people working their fields and farming their crops. But since slavery was now outlawed, they came up with a new system, and it was called sharecropping.
Mm.
So Black people now worked the fields, and they owned their own small piece of land, but all of the essential tools, the seeds that they plant, the plows that they use to harvest, all of the equipment came from the plantation owners.
Mm.
And they said, "We'll let you use this stuff on your own land, but you have to give us half of everything that you grow. And even after you give us half of everything that you grow, you'll still owe us money. So you will never be out of debt." And so it became this new legal form of slavery where they were not owned by the plantation, but the plantation owned everything around them. And it
Mm.
controlled their life and it controlled their world. That's what sharecropping was. And it existed for many years after the Civil War. And so in my book, I talk about sharecropping on Madison Avenue, where minority owned agencies are trying to have their own clients and their own business. And the large mainstream agencies say, "Well, we'll help you get a client, but we will control the flow of money. We will control how much you can make. We will control how you are able to communicate with the client. It can only happen through us. We'll control what you can say to the media. It can only happen through us." And it was, for all intents and purposes, and is the same kind of system as sharecropping,
mm,
where the big white agencies set all the rules, they set all the terms, and the small minority agencies have to live by those rules and those terms if they want to make any money at all. And
oh,
that's unfortunately a big part of the existing system.
yeah, and that's sad. That's really sad. Well, Mark, what do you think the future is for small agencies, for black people or the other people from other minor? I'm so sorry to be saying this way, like other from my minor ethnicity. Yeah, I mean, I find it
Yeah.
very difficult to say to differentiate between to want to differentiate between white, black, and all of that. But it's sadly how it is. That's how it is basically. Yeah. So what's the future for for others and for minorities and for small organizations that try to grow in the advertising space, especially in the advertising space?
Well, in the business today, there are many, many more small black owned agencies than there were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or more. Um, there are a lot more um, creative people in the business who are entrepreneurs, who are
Mm,
saying, I don't want to work for someone else. I want to work for myself. I will build my own business with my own company, and I will, put myself out there and see if I can make my way in the world.
mm,
And I think that that's terrific. And I think that that kind of entrepreneurial impulse will drive a lot more change in the business than the old structure.
mm,
Now, it remains to be seen what happens over time, but I'm optimistic. I think that um, there's a tremendous amount of positive energy toward greater diversity, toward greater creativity, and toward greater independence. And so I want to help drive that and help inspire that to whatever degree I can play a part.
mm. Yes, yes. Please do that because I believe that the future of advertising is still bright and there's a lot of space there for not only the white people but also for the black, the brown, and other ethnicity, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, I've learned a lot from you from this conversation. Um, for those who out there who want to get the book or maybe still want to ask you some more questions, maybe in regards to advertising or other things, maybe career also, what's the best way to go about all of this?
Um, if you want to get in the business, the first thing that you should do is watch a lot of commercials, see a
Mm,
lot of ads, make that part of your natural language. you know Make it something that you innately and instinctively understand. Is how does that ad appeal to someone? What is this ad saying that changes someone's behavior? So study that the way you would study any subject. It's not so much in the classroom, it's not so much what you read in books, although do read some. There are some very good books on advertising, but the best classroom is just look at as many ads as possible and go, why does that work, or why is that ad working and that one over there doesn't work?
mm,
And if you can begin to teach yourself those things, that's the best skill set. And reach out, find people who are in the business now. Because at the start of our conversation, I said, in order to get in the business, you have to know somebody who's already in there. So network, um, find people who are in the business, talk to them. They'll be more than happy to spend time talking to you. Advertising people are very talkative people, so they're happy to have conversations. And I think most people are good people and will reach back and help others, and will mentor others if they're asked. Most of the people that I know in the business would be only too happy to help other people make this a more diverse business.
mm. Oh, great. That's good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation, Mark. I've learned so much from you, even from your stories and from your book. Also, it's going to be released on the 1st of July, and I encourage everyone
Yes.
out there to get the book. if you are, interested in advertising, especially, it's a good read for you. If you are interested in just building up your career, it's a perfect book for you. If you're just interested in learning about someone else's story and lessons from that, wonderful read for you, basically. So
Absolutely.
yes, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate this.
Toby, thank you again.